Of Yen Young a disciple, the master said, "Young might indeed do for a prince." On being asked by this Yen Young his opinion of a certain individual, the master replied, "He is passable, impetuous, though." But, argued the disciple, if a man habituate himself to a reverent regard for duty even while in his way of doing things he is impetuous in the oversight of the people committed to his charge, is he not passable? If on the other hand, he habituate himself to impetuosity of mind, and show it also in his way of doing things, is he not then over-impetuous? "You are right," said the master. Footnote 1, lit. For a south-facer. It was then, and is still the custom for persons of royal rank to sit facing the south. Yen Young was one of the most approved of the sage's disciples. Footnote 2, Jung Kong, in the original. But this was only the posthumous title of the Yen Young just mentioned. And I think it better to avoid confusion in the names. The same remark applies to paragraph 4. Footnote 3, Zi Sang Pei Zi, in the original, evidently some official. But as nothing is known of him, the name, uncouth enough to English ears, is surely better omitted. When the Duke Gai inquired which of the disciples were devoted to learning, Confucius answered him, "There was one Yen who loved it. A man whose angry feelings towards any particular person he did not suffer to visit upon another. A man who would never fall into the same error twice. Unfortunately, his allotted time was short, and he died, and now his like is not to be found. I have never heard of one so devoted to learning." While Zihua, a disciple, was away on a mission to Tsu, the disciple Yenyu, on behalf of his mother, applied for some grain. "Give her 3 pecks," said the master. He applied for more. "Give her 8. Then, Yen gave her 50 times that amount. The master said, when Zihua went on that journey to Tsu, he had well-fed steeds yoked to his carriage, and was arrayed in light furs. I have learnt that the superior man should help those whose needs are urgent, not help the rich to be more rich. When Yuan-Zi became prefect under him, he gave him 900 measures of grain, but the prefect declined to accept them. "You must not," said the master. "May they not be of use to the villages and hamlets around you?" Footnote 1, Chi, in original, but only another name for the same man. Footnote 2. At this time Confucius was criminal judge in his native state of Lu. Yuan-Zi had been a disciple. The commentators add that this was the officer's proper salary, and that he did wrong to refuse it. Speaking of Yen Young again, the master said, "If the offspring of a speckled ox be red in color and horned, even though men may not wish to take it for sacrifice, would the spirits of the hills and streams reject it?" Footnote 1. Yen Young had a bad father, and men were inclined to avoid him on that account. Hence this remark made on his behalf. Oxen acceptable for sacrifice were required to be red and horned. Adverting to Hui again, he said, "For 3 months there would not be in his breast one thought recalcitrant against his feeling of goodwill towards his fellow men. The others may attain to this for a day or for a month, but there they end." When asked by Qi Kong whether Zilu was fit to serve the government, the master replied, "Zilu is a man of decision. What should prevent him from serving the government?" Asked the same question respecting Zikong and Yenyu, he answered similarly, pronouncing Zikong to be a man of perspicacity, and Yenyu to be one versed in the polite arts. Footnote 1. Qi Kong was head of one of the 3 families of Lu. He inquires respecting the qualifications of these disciples for office. The questions are put separately about each, and are formally answered by the master, as if by way of certificate. When the head of the Qi family sent for Min Ziqing to make him governor of the town of Pi, that disciple said, "Politely decline for me. If the offer is renewed, then indeed I shall feel myself obliged to go and live on the further bank of the Wan." Footnote 1. Min Ziqing was one of the sage's favorite disciples, and he, no more than his master, could brook the manners of the Qi family. On the farther bank of the Wan, he would be out of the territory and free from further solicitation. Peng Yu had fallen ill, and the master was inquiring after him. Taking hold of his hand held out from the window, he said, "It is taking him off. Alas, his appointed time has come. Such a man, and to have such an illness." Footnote 1. Another favorite disciple. He was suffering, it is thought, from leprosy. Of Wu Yagain, a right worthy man indeed was he. With his simple wooden dish of rice, and his one gourd basin of drink, away in his poor back lane, in a condition too grievous for others to have endured, he never allowed his cheery spirits to droop. A right worthy soul was he. "It is not," Yen Yu once apologized, "that I do not take pleasure in your doctrines. It is that I am not strong enough," the master rejoined. "It is when those who are not strong enough have made some moderate amount of progress that they fail and give up, but you are now drawing your own line for yourself." Addressing Zi Xia, the master said, "Let your scholarship be that of gentlemen, and not like that of common men." Footnote 1. That is, seeking self-improvement for its own sake and for duty's sake, not from motives of material benefit. When Ziyu became governor of Wuxing, the master said to him, "Do you find good men about you?" The reply was, "There is Tan Tai Miming, who when walking eschews bypaths, and who, unless there be some public function, never approaches my private residence." Footnote 1. This description of him would hardly have been recorded if it did not contain more than appears on the surface. The quantum principle pursues open and plain courses, and knows how to mind his own business. Meng Qifan, said the master, is no sounder of his own praises. During a stampede, he was in the rear, and as they were about to enter the city gate, he whipped up his horses and said, "'Twas not my daring made me lag behind. My horses would not go." Footnote 1. An officer of Lu. Omitted dicta of the master. Whoever has not the glib utterance of the priest too, as well as the handsomeness of Prince Chao of Song, will find it hard to keep out of harm's way in the present age. Who can go out but by that door? Why walks no one by these guiding principles? Footnote 1. Evidently spoken in some room where he customarily gave instruction, and from which there was no other exit but by the door. Where plain naturalness is more in evidence than polish, we have the man from the country. Where polish is more in evidence than naturalness, we have the town scribe. It is when naturalness and polish are equally evident that we have the ideal man. The life of a man is his rectitude, life without it. Such may you have the good fortune to avoid. Footnote 1. I would ask the attention of critics to this rendering of a rather naughty saying. 人之生也，直刚之生也，幸而免. Life is here explained in the commentaries as the rational principle underlying the 生理本. Since the above was written, a Chinese friend has sent me the following free rendering. Man is born upright. If he can exist without uprightness, his existence is fortunate. And he adds in a note that when Confucius says this, he refers to the goodness of God in allowing such people without uprightness to exist in the world and in giving them a larger space for repentance. My friend does not translate the last character, which means to avoid or escape. They who know it are not as those who love it, nor they who love it as those who rejoice in it. That is, have the fruition of their love for it. Footnote 1, though it must, I think, refer to some subject under discussion at the time. To the average man, and those above the average, it is possible to discourse on higher subjects. To those from the average downwards, it is not possible. Fan Chi put a query about wisdom. The master replied, to labor for the promoting of righteous conduct among the people of the land, to be serious in regard to spiritual beings, and to hold aloof from them. This may be called wisdom. To a further query about philanthropy, he replied, those who possess that virtue find difficulty with it at first, success later. Footnote 1, that is, probably not to be too familiar, to show reverence from a distance. Footnote 2, an unsatisfactory answer and evasive, unless it be that it was in reply to a particular question about its exercise. But he was too slow to speak on this subject. See Book 9, Section 1. Men of practical knowledge, he said, find their gratification among the rivers of the lowland. Men of sympathetic social feeling find theirs among the hills. The former are active and bustling, the latter calm and quiet. The former take their day of pleasure, the latter look to length of days. Alluding to the states of Zi and Lu, he observed that Zi, by one change, might attain to the condition of Lu, and that Lu, by one change, might attain to good government. Footnote 1, the one change would be, in each case, a reform in the direction of the proprieties. Zhe was even worse than Lu. An exclamation of the master, satirizing the times, when old terms relating to government were still used while bereft of their old meaning. A quart, and not a quart. Quart, indeed. Quart, indeed. Footnote 1. The word means really an angular cup, or perhaps a horn cup, at that time made without the angles, or not of horn. The meaning will come home to English readers in the above translation. Times are changed even with ourselves as regards such things, and such things are signs of the times. Sai Wo, a disciple, put a query. Said he, suppose a philanthropic person were told, there's a fellow creature down in the well. Would he go down after him? Why should he really do so? Answered the master. The good man, or a superior man, might be induced to go, but not to go down. He may be misled, but not be fooled. 1. The superior man, said he, with his wide study of books, and hedging himself round by the rules of propriety, is not surely, after all that, capable of overstepping his bounds. Once when the master had had an interview with Non-Si, which had scandalized his disciple Zilu, he uttered this solemn adjuration, if I have done aught amiss, may heaven reject me, may heaven reject me. Footnote 1. The Duchess of Wei, who had been guilty of criminal intercourse with her brother, the Prince Show of paragraph 14. How far-reaching, said he, is the moral excellence that flows from the constant mean. It has for a long time been rare among the people. Zikong said, Suppose the case of one who confers benefits far and wide upon the people, and who can, in so doing, make his bounty universally felt. How would you speak of him? Might he be called philanthropic? The master exclaimed, "What a work for philanthropy! He would require indeed to be a sage. He would put into shade even yo and shun." Well, a philanthropic person, desiring for himself a firm footing, is led on to give one to others. Desiring for himself an enlightened perception of things, he is led on to help others to be similarly enlightened. If one could take an illustration coming closer home to us than yours, that might be made the starting point for speaking about philanthropy. Footnote 1. I cannot conceive how Dr. Legg has been able to translate this last sentence thus: to be able to judge of others by what is nigh in ourselves. This may be called the art of virtue. Had he forgotten his Shiking Book 3, Section 3, Paragraph 2, last stanza?
近取辟
Here is the same as
取辟不远
their equals take an illustration not far-fetched.